And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Okay, tonight's weather showing snow across the central interior along this Arctic front up in here with winter storm warnings out for the Fairbanks area and the Tanana Valley. Winter weather advisories here elsewhere along that frontal boundary. Drier to the north, still windy on the Arctic coast and mostly cloudy, lighter winds and still mild temperatures here across southern Alaska. And diminishing shower activity for the North Gulf Coast, southern Kenai Peninsula area. Still damp and unsettled for the southeast coast. Out to the west, weakening front brings rain into the central Aleutians. And then for tomorrow, that front, new low develops there along the front there, moves across the Pribilof. So periods of rain there southward across the Alaska Peninsula, tapering off over the eastern Aleutians. A couple of troughs out to the west for more windy conditions, wet weather from Adak and Atka westward. And this stationary Arctic front in the interior, separating the colder air to the north and northeast and the milder air to the south. So dry across southern Alaska here. Periods of snow continue. Several more inches expected tomorrow in this area here. Blizzard warning continues tonight and till 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon for the Arctic coast for those winds gusting anywhere from, well, up to at least 45 miles per hour, maybe not as strong on the east side as you saw today. And that's out, and then things should come down under that level late tomorrow afternoon. And for the southeast coast, drier conditions in store for the day Friday and Friday afternoon especially. And then nothing but dry weather there, some clearing, especially in the north for the day Saturday. So a pretty good first day of the weekend coming up for the southeast coast. And mostly dry here across southern Alaska. This area, light snow getting pushed down into the eastern Alaska range and possibly into the northern Kuskokwim Valley, or I'm sorry, the northern Copper River Basin area with some clouds and possible flurries trying to sneak into the Susitna Valley. But anyway, colder, drier conditions up to the north, much lighter winds now for the Arctic coast with that blizzard warning over. Rain and snow showers here with southerly flow into the northern Bering Sea, especially St. Lawrence Island here, northern Bering Sea. Rain and snow showers possible along the southwest coast, Dillingham, Togiak up in toward possibly Bethel, and then some light rain over the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Big storm out here to the west, starting to bring some increasing winds to the western Aleutians, especially in the afternoon hours. Coastal water forecast here for the coast, on the south coast. Kind of a north wind, light north winds at about 10 knots, southwest 10 for the central coast and the north coast. East winds at 10 knots with the seas running anywhere from 8 to 10 feet. Southeast at 15, Lincoln Isle, Glacier Bay and Stevens Passage. Light north winds for Clarence Strait. Outlook for the day on Saturday. Central and south coast here, north winds, north to northwest, 10 to 15 knots, north to northeast at 10 knots for the north coast. Pick those winds up over the northern panhandle there, especially Lynn Canal, 30 knots with 5-foot seas. Small craft advisories also in the forecast for Stevens Passage now. North winds at 25 knots, Clarence Strait, north winds at 15. And for the North Gulf Coast tomorrow, light variable wind conditions. And that pattern extends all the way across the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay with winds around 10 knots and seas 5 to 8 feet. Cook Inlet, not much different. East to north winds at about 10 knots and light east winds at 15 knots for Prince William Sound. And then for Saturday, still looking at light variable winds, Kamishak Bay, the Barren Islands, much of the North Gulf Coast, 10 to 15 knots. Prince William Sound, light variable winds at 10 knots. And southern Cook Inlet, northeast at 10, light variable winds north of the Forelands. Kodiak Island tomorrow, west winds at 20 knots. Bristol Bay here, west winds 25 knots. And for the Alaska Peninsula, we've got south to southeast winds coming in at about 25 knots. And for the day Saturday here for the Alaska Peninsula, east to northeast winds at 15 to 20 knots, east at 20 for Bristol Bay. Kodiak Island now, light variable winds at 10 knots with 2 to 4 foot seas. Eastern Aleutians, good gales expected tomorrow with winds 40 to 45 knots. Southwest 25 knot winds for Adak and Atka. And those winds pick back up as we get out toward the stronger low center back to the west and northwest here, up to 45 knots out of the southwest with seas up to around 25 feet there from Kiska to Shemya. And then for the day on Saturday, still pretty windy, looking at gales here, 35 to 45 knots southerlies, Kiska to Shemya. And then Amchitka Island, southwest 30 to 40 knots, 25 knot winds from the west-southwest for Adak and Atka. Eastern Aleutians, north to northwest winds, 20 to 25 knots. And for the southwest coast, we've got variable winds at 15 knots for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. Otherwise, Yukon Delta coast, light southeast wind at 10, west at 10 for St. Lawrence Island, and Norton Sound east at 10. But gale warnings here for the Bering Sea, Pribilof Islands, and St. Matthew Island, southeast at 35 knots. Those become light and variable for the Pribilofs on Saturday, down to 10 knots, seas subsiding to 9 feet, south at 20 for St. Matthew Island. Small craft advisories here for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, east winds at 25 knots. Otherwise, east winds, Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island at 20 knots, out of the east at 30 knots for Norton Sound. Up to the north tomorrow, good gales here along the central and eastern Beaufort coast, out of the east at 35 to 40 knots, even into the western Arctic coast. Then for the Chukchi Sea, east winds at 25 knots. And for the day on Saturday, east winds 25 to 35 knots for the Chukchi Sea here, and brisk wind advisories from much of the Arctic coast for east winds at 20 to 25 knots.